Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's Europe session, Health and Sustainability, Where Two Worlds Collide. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Christine Lott, and I'm with Blue Diamond Growers. I head up the international marketing for Blue Diamond, in which my role is to grow our brands, Almond Breeze Almond Milk and Blue Diamond Almonds, around the globe. I also sit on the Almond Board's Global Market Development Committee, and I'm delighted to be today's moderator. With me today on today's panel is Abby Kulkarni and Kath Martino from the Almond Board, and then Laura Marine of Sterling Rice Group. Also, via video, will be Dariella Rakin, who's the Director of Europe and Global PR for Almond Board, who unfortunately couldn't make it today and is still in the UK. I will be kicking off today's presentation by providing some background on Europe, which is an important market for the almond industry. Europe certainly doesn't have the population size of India or China. However, collectively, Western Europe as a region is about the same size as the US market, which makes it an important region for the almond industry. In fact, Western European shipments account for about 25% of global almond shipments. And shipments continue to grow, especially in the EU4, which comprises of the UK, France, Germany, and Italy, which are the four markets that the Almond Board's marketing and communications programs focus on. Collectively, the EU4 outpaces the largest export market, India, in terms of net shipments. However, Europe is a region under tremendous change. When we look at how almonds have been used in the past and how consumers are using them now. Historically, this was a region that was predominantly supported by traditional categories such as bakery and marzipan. And the per capita consumption of almonds in Europe was higher than anywhere else in the world. But eating habits are changing. Usage in these traditional categories is declining as consumers are looking toward more healthier options. Where marzipan and bakery were commanding the large share of almond usage, it's now shifting to products such as almond milk and snacking on almonds. While healthy eating is changing how Europeans eat, how food is produced and its impact on the planet is becoming more important to their consumer choices. European consumers are very discerning about the food that they eat, and taste is still king. However, where the food is from and how it is produced is now a big factor in their purchasing decisions. And with consumers attaching so much importance to this, almost equally to the nutrient content. So why is this? On one hand, it's the legislative environment. In the EU, it is like no other around the globe. With the EU Green Deal and Farm to Fork strategy, sustainability is at the top of mind for food manufacturers. There's even a new food eco-labeling scheme called EcoScore that's being trialed that would have on front of pack the impact of food choices. On the other hand, there's pressure coming from the media. The EU media is relentless and has been focusing on things about the environment and climate change. And foods like dairy, avocados, and almonds too have found themselves under the spotlight being scrutinized for our sustainability credentials. All of this is having an impact on how consumers are making their purchasing decisions. It is clear that the industry's presence in Europe is pivotal at this time. Not only in the EU4 collectively, one of our largest export regions, it's important that we continue to be active on our marketing and communications programs to offset any declines that we see from these traditional categories and be prepared for these new challenges to stay ahead of them. This region also is a trendsetter globally when it comes to food manufacturing as well as to sustainability. The rest of today's presentation will look at these points in more detail. But first, here is a video from Dariella presenting an overview of today's presentations.
Greetings from the UK, where we are experiencing an unusually sunny day. I'm Dariella Rolfe-Rackheim, Director of European Region and Global Public Relations at the Almond Board of California. So as they say in the UK, I am absolutely gutted that I can't be there with you today and this week. Unfortunately, a couple of my family members tested positive for COVID this week. So I'm gutted that I can't be there or that I have to present through a screen yet again, and gutted that I won't get to interact with you. I think conference is always such a special time for us to reflect back on the future, what we've accomplished, to get energized for what's to come. But most importantly, it's really a time for us to spend time with you, to understand your world a little bit better, to understand what keeps you motivated, passionate, and potentially what keeps you up at night. So I hope that this European presentation gives you a little glimpse into our world on this side of the pond and a better understanding of how we are building a love for almonds with our European consumers. So today you'll hear from Abby, from Kath, from Laura, who will give you a glimpse into the various parts of our European program. We'll hear about our pan-European activities, which include the trade and regulatory monitoring to ensure that we can monitor changes so that nothing affects our ability to continue to ship almonds into Europe. We'll talk about our food professional audience, which remains incredibly important to us, and how we're educating and inspiring them to continue to use almonds as an essential ingredient in their products. And then we'll talk about trends and our consumer program. We deal with the consumer program a little bit differently. It's much more targeted to specific target audiences and to specific markets. We have 4 markets that we're targeting, which offer the greatest potential for growth in Europe. And those markets are the UK, Germany, France, and Italy. Italy being our newest market, but as of this year, the market that actually has the highest per capita consumption of almonds of all the markets where the Almond Board is currently conducting marketing activity. So with these consumer audiences, we have 2 key strategies. The first is to continue to raise awareness of all those amazing health benefits that almonds provide. And then 2, and most recently, we have started to educate about the sustainability journey that this industry is going through and has been going through for so many years. So these 2 areas of health and sustainability are really starting to merge in the eyes of our European consumers. And that's what we'll hear about today, how these 2 areas are really becoming one. But first, I'm going to hand it over to Abby, who will talk about the trade and regulatory issues. So Abby Kulkarni joined the Almond Board, our Global Regulatory and Technical Affairs team, earlier this year, and in his role, he monitors key export markets for any issues that may impact the California almond industry. Before joining the Almond Board, he was with California Walnuts for 9 years, so really brings a wealth of experience in dealing with regulatory issues with the trade. So thank you all for coming to today's session, and special thanks to my team, who is really having to take a little bit of an extra burden with my absence this week. So have a wonderful conference. Again, gutted not to be there, but I'm sure I will see you soon, or at least I'll see you next year. So thank you all. Have a good conference, and it's over to you, Abby.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for that introduction, Dariella, even if from afar. You are being missed, so we hope you'll be here next year. So as Dariella mentioned, I'm going to touch on the regulatory issues that we are facing and we are likely to face in the near future with the EU Green Deal. So let's start with the very first regulatory interface when a shipment of California almonds arrives in EU, and that's at the ports. So from time to time, we find out that the EU port officials are not necessarily as familiar with their own regulations. So sometimes shipments get stuck for not having pre-port check or PEC certification, as we call, which is for pre-clearance with aflatoxin testing here in California. And So when these shipments get stuck, of course, the panicked shipper calls us, we get involved. Now, what this scenario is, any guess in the audience? What's wrong with that? No one? Okay, so the PEC certification is voluntary. You do not need a PEC certification to ship almonds to Europe. And so then after we get involved, we get the shipments released, but in all this, we wasted a few days. So to minimize these kind of disruptions, last year, the Almond Board started a program for educating the European port officials. And that program was very well received, so we educated them about what the PEC program is and emphasizing that it's voluntary. And that was very well received, so we are doing year 2 of that program this year. In fact, next week we are hosting a webinar for German port officials. Oops, went too far. Okay. The other factor we face is uneven implementation of regulations across different member states. So, for example, when a shipment is rejected for having high aflatoxin counts, Spain and Italy automatically flag the shipper, and the next 10 shipments are then inspected. So you go from having less than 1% inspection rate to 100% for the next 10 months, whereas the other member states do not do that. And then there is difference within Spain and Italy of how they handle the rejected shipments. So Spain, for example, allows the shipments to go outside of Spain to other EU member states for reprocessing, and then they're retested and released in the market. Whereas Italy so far has been largely reluctant to let the shipments go out of Italy. So that creates some challenges. If you don't find an option in Italy, you have to bring the shipment back. So that's a waste of time and money. So that's something we've continued to chip away at the Italian authorities. But as you know, with most of these kind of things, it takes time. The switching slightly track to product fate. So a lot of times we see that existing registration of pesticides are revoked, or the MRLs, the maximum residual limits for pesticides, are dropped to their lowest limits at 0.01 ppm. And EU allows a very limited transition time for impacted product, only 6 months. So that's fine for fresh fruits and vegetables because they're consumed in the next 6 months. But something like almonds that has 2+ years of shelf life, that becomes a challenge. So you're essentially applying new regulations to that was imported under older regulations. So that's another issue that we've faced from time to time. And then EU has been expanding its scope of regulatory controls to substances or compounds that were traditionally been an issue for almonds or tree nuts. And I've listed a couple of examples there. Otrotoxin A, or OTA, is a kind of mycotoxin. It's an issue for beer, wine, coffee, those kind of substances, but never for tree nuts. But EU is establishing a limit for OTA for almonds now. And it's going to be a fairly arbitrary limit because even EPA does not have any limits established for it, OTA, because it's never been an issue. Ditto with heavy metals, never been an issue. It's primarily with beverages, juices, rice, those kind of products, but never for almonds. But EU's going ahead and establishing limits for heavy metals as well. So we're starting to see this expansion of regulatory controls in EU. Oops. So those are some of the current issues we are facing. Now let's look at some of the issues we might face in the future. For that, we'll look at the EU Farm to Fork, which is one of their flagship pillar under the EU Green Deal. And here I've listed some of the highlights. The EU is planning 50% reduction in pesticides over the next 9 years by 2030, 20% reduction in synthetic fertilizer use, 25% land to be brought under organic farming, and 50% reduction in food loss. So their overall approach is to promote a sustainable and healthy food supply. Now that sounds great on paper, but how are they going to implement that? It still remains seen, especially without impacting production as well as imports, because this in theory applies to European growers, but Europe has made it clear that they will apply similar principles to imports coming into Europe. So that's something that we'll be watching of what impact it happens. So EU Farm to Fork is largely going to drive a lot of regulations in the upcoming few years, especially due to pesticide usage. As we saw in the slide, 50% reduction in pesticide. What does that mean? That means they are going to revoke some of the existing registrations, or they are going to severely restrict the pesticide import tolerance limits. And this also kind of brings greater discussion on the role of science if any, in EU's decision making? Because so far it seems it's largely driven by political calculations rather than actual science, especially with the push-pull between the risk-based versus hazard-based approach that the rest of the world uses and EU. So for example, to simplify this, if you want to have a cup of coffee or tea, you'll boil some water. Of course, you're going to be careful in handling the boiling water. That's the risk-based approach. What EU is going to say is it's isolating the hazard and saying boiling water is a hazard, so let's put restrictions on boiling water. Well, do you want your coffee or not? So that's kind of the big difference between EU and US and the rest of the world. And they're also proposing, as Christine alluded earlier, front-of-pack labeling, where they not only want to highlight what's the nutritional aspects of the product, but also environmental footprint. And again, questions remain, like how are you calculating the environmental impact? What's the methodology? Can you use something that's across the board from fish to almonds to chocolates to everything? We don't know. But EU's moving ahead with these kind of schemes, so that's a little bit unnerving. And here is a timeline for implementation of the EU Green Deal. And this was prepared by our consultants, Prospero. You might have attended Christine Suka's excellent presentation yesterday. So this kind of gives us a glimpse of some of the regulatory challenges we're expected to face in the next few years, be it in terms of additional regulations on pesticides, in terms of marketing standards, in terms of labeling, and so on. So that's something we'll be monitoring very closely. And a word about Brexit now. As you know, now UK has now charting its own regulatory path post-Brexit. What that means is also it's starting to implement its own regulatory policies and re-establishing some of the regulatory agencies that we didn't have to deal with in the past because it was all under the EU umbrella. Especially, we'll be dealing with separate customs control, so no longer be the port of arrival in UK will not be a EU border post, but it will be a UK border post. So we are monitoring closely what that means and what regulations UK is proposing, because that will have an impact on our industry and exports there. And so to sum up some of the key takeaways, I'm going to just go to some of these points. We need to understand the broader regulation, broader environment that's driving these regulations, for example, the Green Deal and Farm to And from experience, we've seen that things can and do change very quickly. So we need to stay engaged very closely. And so there is a great value in terms of having this valuable relationship with various stakeholders. For example, EU port officials, as we are doing the training program, foreign ag service posts across the different embassies and consulates, local industry and trade groups, and there's just a few logos of industry groups that we are part of, Food Drink Europe, NDFT, European Snack Association, and FRUCOM, because we realize that there is value in having these local supports, because a lot of these businesses depend on a reliable supply of California almonds, and when it's impacted, it becomes a local issue. So we want to work with them, give them talking points and data, so then they can then take it with their local ministries or officials, and it becomes more of a local issue. And we have more leverage that way than knocking on the doors from here. And so with that now, I'm going to turn it over to our EU Marketing Pro, Kat Martino. Kat, along with Dariella, monitors and oversees our promotional campaigns in EU and UK. Kat has been associated with the Almond Board for the past 6 years. And with this, I turn it over to Kat.
Thanks, Abby, and good morning, everyone. So, switching gears a bit now, I'm going to start off today talking a little bit about the importance of Europe as an ingredients market for California almonds. Because although the vast majority of our investment in marketing in Europe goes towards raising awareness of almonds to consumers, food professionals are also important for us in this market. And this chart really shows the significance of Europe as a center for global innovation when it comes to food. The bar here shows that in the last year alone, Europe was responsible for introducing almost half of total food introductions in the world. And it's exactly the same story when you look at new products introduced with nuts and new products introduced with almonds. Europe is responsible for almost half of all of those products. And if we look at almonds specifically, Europe introduced nearly twice more almond products last year than any other region in the world. And if we look a little bit closer at that data, we can see that Europe is leading the world in 6 key categories. And it's worth me pausing and pointing out a couple things on this slide that Christine alluded to earlier. So in Europe, as many of you know, almonds and bakery went hand in hand. That was the traditional roots that almonds had in Europe. So it's really significant for us to see that Europe is now leading in more modern categories like snacking and bars, which are not heritage categories for Californians in Europe. Christine also talked earlier about the influence that Europe has on the global stage and how that influence really stretches way beyond Europe's borders. It may surprise you to learn that Europe is actually the leading exporter of food and drink products globally. And the bar chart here shows that. And when you stop and consider that a lot of the key manufacturers of food, the likes of Almonds and Nestle, are based in Europe, and then when you consider that almost half of new product introductions came out of Europe, you start to get an idea of the impact that our food professional program in Europe is having on the rest of the world. Because those products are staying in Europe, they're being exported elsewhere in the world. So the kind of things that we're seeing on shelf here, and indeed in other countries like China and India, a lot of them are coming out of the EU. So why is it we're seeing this increase in new product introductions with almonds in Europe? Well, one of the main reasons is that they provide a really strong health halo to food manufacturers. And I know that I'm preaching to the choir here, in a market where almonds are very well established as a healthy snack. They have been for very many years, but that's not the case in Europe. As I mentioned earlier, the heritage of almonds is really with bakery and marzipan, which are really not associated with health. So on this chart, that orange line is really significant because it shows a 10 percentage point increase in new product introductions carrying a health claim in the last 5 years. And where things start to get really interesting is if we drill down and look at the nature of some of these health claims that are appearing on pack. What's fascinating here is that we're really starting to see a blurring of boundaries between health and sustainability. And we're talking about here specifically are claims like vegetarian, vegan, free from, plant-based, natural, which really begs the question, when consumers are going in search of these products with health claims, what is really driving that behavior? Is it that they're good for me, or is it that they're good for the environment? Or is it a bit of both? So, taking a step back, I'm going to attempt to give you an overview of some of the cultural trends that are really impacting consumer behavior in Europe. And there's 4 key trends that I'm going to concentrate on. The first trend is values-based eating. And this is really about a health plus approach to diet. So, years ago, being healthy to Europeans meant probably dropping a few pounds by following the next faddy diet or 8-minute abs routine. It's about a lot more than that. It's about more than food nourishing our bodies. For those of you who were in the US marketing presentation yesterday, you heard the team there talk about wellness. And that's really what this trend is about. Now, when people are eating food, it's not to nourish the body, it's to nourish the soul, the mind, and even the environment. This trend really does take that notion of you are what you eat to a whole new level, because people's sense of identity is so intrinsically wrapped up with what they're putting into their bodies, and really seeing that come into play with the increase in flexitarian and vegetarian eating in Europe. But don't just take my word for it. We spoke to consumers across our 4 markets, and I'm going to play a video clip for you now from a consumer in France.
Food is a big part of French culture, and I think French people eat and shop intuitively, like our parents and our grandparents do. Food should be enjoyed, and it should, of course, be tasty, but it also needs to be healthy and natural and responsibly produced. And if it's grown locally, that's even better for me. I prefer shopping at my local market, but supermarkets are convenient and offer a good selection of organic and natural produce.
So the second trend is natural nutrition. And this is really a reaction that we're seeing to all the choice that consumers are faced with in Europe. I spoke a couple of minutes ago about all the innovation that we're seeing coming out of Europe, and really it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, of course, it's being driven by consumer desire for something new and exciting, but they're also really scrutinizing the ingredients lists on these new and exciting products, because ultimately what they're looking for is simplicity and reassurance that what they're putting in their bodies is giving them a natural source of nutrition.
The way I eat is pretty simple. I try to eat food that is tasty but nutritious and that gives me energy for the day. But there's so much to choose from. All the shelves in the supermarkets are now full with so-called healthy snacks. So it's hard for me to tell which ones are actually good for me.
And our third trend is plant power. I really hesitate to call this a trend because it feels as though plant-based eating is really ingrained in society in Europe. It really has become normalized over the last few years. And the data tells us that in the last 3 years, the value of the plant-based market in Europe has almost doubled. And that growth is being driven by 2 of our 4 markets, the United Kingdom and Germany. In the last year, a quarter of all new food products introduced in those markets carried a plant-based claim. And just to give you some context how that compares to the United States, that figure in the United States is just 11%. So really, plant-based innovation is much further ahead in Europe than here. There's other data from Mintel that shows that in the UK and Germany, 40% of all households are now identifying as being flexitarian. So this really is something that is very entrenched in society. And I've got a clip from director of food research and innovation company Innova, who will tell you a little bit more about this trend in Europe.
Plant-based has been a global trend, and every year we see it going more and more mainstream. Health is the #1 purchase driver for plant-based products. A study by the Vegan Society in the UK shows that 20% of British consumers consumed less meat since the start of the pandemic. Chefs are also giving consumers more ideas about what's possible with plant-based. There are now 12 Michelin-starred vegetarian restaurants. And the big multinational giants are also joining this trend. Cadbury launched a vegan version of its dairy milk bar with almond paste. As consumers find more ways to eat plant-based, this is the trend that's just going to continue to grow and grow.
And the fourth and final trend is thirst for knowledge. And again, this is something that we're seeing as a reaction to the times that we live in. It's a reaction to this age of misinformation and fake news. Never before have levels of criticism been quite so high. I know from how I consume news that I'm questioning absolutely everything that people tell me, everything I hear and everything I see. And I think that this is even more important when it comes to food and health. People really want to trust what they're putting into their bodies. And we spoke to a health professional in the UK who gives us a little bit more detail about what's motivating consumers here.
COVID has created a significant shift in mentality, with many consumers being hyper-focused on immunity at the beginning of the pandemic. Later, as we learnt more about lifestyle and the impact of diet and nutrition on COVID risk, health and wellness became more of a focus. As is the case globally, we've seen the impact of social media scaremongering and the pushing of non-evidence-based health messages during this time. The Almond board here in the UK are doing a brilliant job of this. As a healthcare professional who works with the media a lot, I appreciate the rigorous research that the almond industry conducts to help us communicate scientifically backed messages about the health benefits of almonds.
Okay, so where does that leave us? And what impact does all of this have on how we approach our marketing in Europe? Well, it's clear that we have 2 very distinct jobs to do. On the one hand, we need to build awareness of almonds' health benefits. There's a real job to do still, solidifying and cementing that health halo. But on the other hand, and concurrently with that, we absolutely have to start communicating to people that almonds are grown in a way that's responsible. And as I hope it became clear from those trends that I talked to you about, in consumers' minds in the EU, there really is an overlap between health and sustainability. So how do we know where to focus our attentions and our efforts when it comes to our marketing programs and our marketing spend? Well, these are not decisions that we take lightly, and as you'd expect, it's guided by research. So every year we undertake consumer tracking research, which looks at a whole range of factors influencing consumer likelihood to buy almonds. And so far, nutrition is ranking higher than sustainability. Both are important. The column here on the left shows that there are 13 or 14 specific health benefits that consumers in the EU are prioritizing over almonds being grown in a way that is good for the environment. Now, that's not to say that we can ignore sustainability. I mean, far from it, because this same data tells us that over the last 5 years, we've seen a not insignificant increase in consumers across all 4 of our markets saying that they would be inclined to eat almonds if they were reassured that they were grown in a way that is good for the environment. And given everything that you've heard this morning so far, the legislative environment, the media environment, the Green Deal, the eco-labelling, this is going away. So ultimately, what it boils down to for us is getting the balance right. And right now, the scales are tipped heavier towards health than sustainability. So the data is guiding us, and the data is telling us that in terms of shifting product and creating market demand, what we need to carry on doing is promoting the health benefits and helping consumers fall in love with almonds through those health benefits. But at the same time, that program must go hand in hand with a program that raises awareness of how almonds are grown in a responsible way and how California almond growers are responsible stewards of land, because ultimately, that's what's going to stop people from falling out of love with almonds in Europe. And with that, I'll hand it over to Laura, who's going to talk a little bit more now in detail about the marketing programs that we're running across all of our markets. Thank you.
Thank you, Kath, and good morning, everyone. So we've talked so much about how it is critical we address this perfect balance of health and sustainability in our marketing programs. So what does that really look like when it comes down to it? So health is absolutely at the core of all of our marketing programs in Europe. That is the #1 reason why consumers will eat more almonds. So that is the foundation of all of our programs. However, consumers' perceptions, attitudes, behaviors around almonds are pretty different across the 4 different countries that we market in. So while health is at that cornerstone of everything we're talking about, we approach it a little bit differently in each of the markets so that we make sure our messages really resonate and meet consumers where they are. So I'm going to take you through each one of our markets so you can see how we're doing that. So the first is the UK. So both Christine and Kath talked so much about innovation in Europe and how Europe is this center of global innovation. Well, when it comes to the UK, that is even more abundant when in the snacking landscape. So in the UK, when consumers think of nuts, they first and foremost think of peanuts. Those aren't really top of mind. And then when they think of healthy snacks, they have a plethora of healthy snacks to choose from, and they're really cool, innovative, new, interesting snacks. So almonds just aren't something that are really coming to mind for them when they're thinking of healthy snacking. So the aim of our campaign in the UK specifically is to first of all break through, get people to think about almonds as a healthy snack. And on top of that, show them how when they eat almonds, they can nail their day like a natural. So they give them the energy and the fuel to nail their day. So I want to show you are just 2 social clips of campaigns that we're running in the UK for our Do You Almond campaign. And you can see how this idea of nailing it like a natural with almonds is coming to life.
Do you almond?
It's our very lovable squirrel. It gets a lot of attention. So now, moving from the UK into Germany, there's a whole different challenge in Germany. Another thing that both Christine and Kath talked about was almonds and bakery, and specifically marzipan. That really, really lives in Germany. So of all the markets in Europe, almonds have the strongest heritage with bakery, marzipan, and then also the Christmas. So we all know about those amazing Christmas markets that they have in Germany that are world-renowned, and having these delicious roasted almonds at those Christmas markets are one of the main parts of the whole experience. So almonds are really, really linked to bakery and Christmas time. People aren't thinking of them as this modern, healthy snack. So our goal here in our advertising, we have a Snack the Sun campaign, and it's to bring forward the energy, the lightness, vibrancy of California and connect that to almonds. So they're not thinking of almonds as the bakery product that their grandmas and moms baked with, but instead as this energetic and vibrant snack that's really healthy for them.
Genieße Mandeln. Deinen natürlichen Beauty Booster voller Leben und Energie. Mit Nährstoffen, die deine Schönheit zum Strahlen bringen. Snack die Sonne.
Okay, and now over to Italy. So as Dariella had mentioned in her opener, Italians love almonds. Of all the markets the Almond Board actively it's in, they have the highest per capita consumption of everyone. So they're eating a lot of almonds and they love them. So great starting point for us. But when we look at Italians and their dietary habits, it's doing a lot. So I know we all think of Italians taking these amazing midday breaks where they go back home, they meet with their family, they have this long, drawn-out lunch, and then they go back to work after that. Unfortunately, it is no longer happening in Italy. Italians are now on the move, on the go. They've adopted a much more busy, modern lifestyle when it comes to eating, and they need food that delivers with that as well. So what we've been trying to do is position almonds as this really healthy snack that they can eat on the go and gives them the energy to keep going throughout their day. And then lastly, over to France. So France is similar to Italy in the fact that they really love almonds. They think they're healthy, they think they're delicious, they see them as a great fit for their lives. But also similar to Italy, French consumers are turning to snacking more and more. Snacking used to be very faux pas in France. It was something that was avoided. They actually had government campaigns saying don't snack. That has drastically changed over the last 10 years, and now the French consumers really rely on snacks to get them through their day. So we are getting ready to launch a new campaign in France. We're in the early stages, so we don't have anything to share with that, but this campaign is going to be completely centered in the long-lasting energy that almonds deliver to keep you going through your day. So we'll be excited to share that with you guys in the coming months. So when we think about all of our health campaigns in these countries, this is what we're doing to target consumers and to resonate with them. But another really important target audience for us are health professionals. So health professionals are mainly registered dietitians, and they lend a lot of credibility to what we're saying. So when we're coming out with health and nutrition news, when we have health professionals backing that up and providing that credibility, our messages mean that much more. But on top of that, we see in some of our markets that registered dietitians are an integral part of consumers' lives. So, here in the US, you might know a handful of people that see a registered dietitian. But for example, in Italy, almost all consumers go to a registered dietitian. So, here we have our doctor, we have our dentist, our hairstylist. There, in Italy, you would have your registered dietitian also, where everyone goes to visit these people and get tips from them to live a healthier lifestyle. So it's really important for us that we're reaching this audience as well, and that they're also promoting almonds as a healthy snack. So that's the whole one side of the equation, right? And as Kath said, we're really weighting ourselves towards health, because that is the reason why consumers will choose almonds and will love almonds. But we have the other end, which is sustainability. And as we talked about, this is the reason consumers may not love almonds. And so we need to protect against that. So we also run a sustainability program in Europe. It's highly targeted to consumers that really care about sustainability, where this impacts their decisions and where they're influencers in this space and will look into this information and can be evangelists for almonds if they know positive things about it, or could be detractors. So it's really important that we get ahead and get our message out to this group and communicate the sustainability journey that the industry is on. So here you can just see several examples of different posts that we've done highly targeted to this important group of influencers when it comes to sustainability. So now I want to show you a video that recaps our marketing program for over the year.
Providing natural protein and nutrients to help fuel your day. Do you, Almond?
So just to wrap up, what does all of this mean? Are we making an impact? And the answer is yes. We see that across our 4 markets, that in 3 of the 4, almonds are rated #1 for being the healthiest nut. On top of that, we see almonds being rated #1 across all 4 markets for the nut most often eaten in other foods. We see our health associations increasing and all positive attributes really increasing. So it's really positive news, but at the same time, we still have big opportunity to continue to expand consumption in Europe. We know that health is the reason why, but we have to continue to communicate about the sustainability journey. Going back to one of the slides that Christine started with at the beginning of this presentation, we know that the history of almonds is really rooted in bakery and marzipan. And 20 years ago, in Europe, we had the highest per capita consumption of almonds. So we want to get back to that place. And we're going to do it by really focusing on health and sustainability. So the 3 things we're going to be focusing on moving forward is #1, we need to build that health halo, the reason why consumers are going to choose almonds. Secondly, we need to talk louder about our sustainability journey. We need to protect against the reason why not to eat almonds. And then lastly, we have to continue to inspire food professionals to use almonds so they continue to show up in products around the world. So that's it. Thank you so much.
I'd like to just thank the panel today, but also the Almond Board and their European team and agencies for the great work that they've done and are continuing to do to grow the love of almonds in Europe. So I would say another round of applause is due. So next, we'll open the floor up for any questions. If you have one, we have mics that you can walk up to and ask a question to any of the panel. They've done such a great job. Everything has been answered. Go ahead.
Is this on? Is this on? Okay. I have to lean right into it. In thinking about the connection between health and sustainability, I know that science doesn't always draw a direct line between the two. And I think there's kind of two ways to approach the issue of sustainability in Europe. One is, what are the concerns that people have connected with almonds in their mind? But there might be a different approach where consumers see, whether rightly or wrongly, a connection between health and sustainability. Have you put any thought into connecting, prioritizing sustainability messaging based on that health perception and sustainability? And if so, what are the topics you see?
So if I'm understanding the question, are you asking why are we not doing more to tie the two things together?
No, just if we could, what would it look like? Yeah, you understand? I think sometimes consumers think that if something's grown with less pesticides, it must be healthier for me. Are you seeing those kinds of connections that consumers make between health and sustainability, whether it's right or wrong?
So the research that we do, it shows that consumers are concerned about how almonds are grown, but they're no more or no less concerned than they are about a variety of other foods. So we do specific sustainability tracking research, and we know that concern levels are increasing for how almonds are produced, but we're not overly concerned by that because it is on a par with how they perceive other crops. So our approach is to carry on doing exactly what we're doing and leveraging that health halo that we have, because there is that natural association in consumers' minds that if a product is plant-based, it's natural, and therefore we are capitalizing on that to give them reasons to carry on eating almonds.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Hello. Sorry. Is there already a sustainability narrative around almonds in Europe, and a negative one? And the same way there seems to be, you hear a lot about particular issues in the U.S. Trying to figure out, compared to the U.S. market, where they are in that, where they are in that journey towards, getting on the, just sort of learning and then off the cliff. And then if there are specific issues, what are they concerned about?
It's a great question. I'm glad you asked it. It's very different in each of our 4 markets. The most scrutiny that media gives to almonds is in the United Kingdom and in Germany. Those markets where, incidentally, I talked about, they're the markets where plant-based eating, vegetarianism, veganism, they are really prominent and they're really driving plant innovation. So in those markets, the media narrative has criticized almonds in the past around 2 key issues, water and bees. So I believe that they are similar issues to what you're referring to here in the US. So yes, there is a media narrative there, but when you look at the total proportion of those kinds of stories in the grand scheme of our marketing, it's minimal. So yes, that exists, and the reason we're out there communicating our health and our sustainability messaging is to try to address that narrative and some of those misconceptions that exist in those markets. I hope that answers your question.
Well, I guess maybe France, Italy, the other countries, not so much?
In France and Italy, we're not seeing that as much. We run reputation management programs in both of those markets. We keep a watching eye there. Really, the issue that we're seeing in those markets is local production. The way that Italians and French people eat, food is at the heart of their culture, and they really value things that are grown locally. So that's not to say that they don't eat California almonds. They do. That, you know, the data that we've talked about today shows that Italy has the highest per capita consumption. So it's not putting them off eating almonds, but local. If you asked an Italian or a French person, their preference would be local. They're certainly not being swayed against eating them.
Yes.
Another great question. So the United Kingdom is, the research that we have shows that in the UK, bee health is the number one issue that consumers are concerned with as it relates to sustainability. Over the coming months, there's an awful lot of work that we're going to be doing focusing on bee health. So we have a big media partnership planned with Hearst, who is the publisher behind Women's Health and Men's Health magazines. And the focus of that is to be on how, really tying together these two themes of how almonds are good for me, but they're also good for bees. And that's really a powerful narrative that we want to get out there to address some of those misconceptions and some of that perhaps more established media narrative that the gentleman here is referring to. Also, some of the social media campaigns that we've been doing around our sustainability messaging have really focused in on pollinators and the role of this industry in leading there. So yes, that is absolutely a focus.
Yes.
Do you think some of the sustainability, call it targets of Europe and the UK, could be a potential limiting factor for California exports, thinking about, you know, various cultural practices and material restrictions? I know historically that has been a challenge, and is that something that we should be concerned about sort of going forward, thinking about how we market? I know we have the CASP program, which works through a lot of these, or quantifying these topics, but thinking about 5-10 years down the road, will that be, you know, mandatory or something of the sort for our growers to export into the future?
So I'll take a first crack, and then Kat, feel free to add anything. So as we saw in the regulatory presentation, yes, that is something we are concerned about, because on paper, EU has announced all these farm to fork strategy, and it applies to European growers, but EU has also indicated that they intend to protect their growers, which are going to apply the same yardstick to anything that's imported. So, and that's something that we're keeping a close eye, because in international trade, typically you look at the product once it's coming at doorstep, not how it was manufactured. And I think Kristen from Prospero made the same point yesterday, is you cannot dictate to other countries how they are being manufactured. As long as they fulfill your importing criteria is what is important. But now EU is going beyond that and saying, well, we want you to produce food a certain way. And that's a big clashing point between EU and the rest of the world. So yes, we are definitely concerned and looking at what sort of regulations might come out of that kind of approach. And that was also the point I made, that this is why we want to get ahead of the game and be engaged right from the beginning, so we can provide that input saying, hold on, you might end up in a place that you're not foreseen by going full speed at these with these policies, because even at EU level, the EU growers are concerned with some of the policies, because there hasn't really been an impact assessment done by European Union. They're just pressing full steam ahead. And so, yeah, definitely. Would you like to add anything in terms of communication?
The only thing worth adding to that is we are seeing in Europe from food manufacturers that they are asking, they want to understand the supply chain, right? They want to know and have that reassurance that the ingredients going into their products have been produced in a responsible way. So that is something that we're hearing more and more from our European manufacturers about.
Any last remaining? Well, while you're reading the rest of today's sessions, if anything comes to mind, our panel will be at the Almond Board booth later today, so feel free to stop by and you can speak to one of them directly. A few little housekeeping things to do and close this session. The next set of presentations will begin at 10 o'clock. They are Food Safety and Quality Roundup in Ballroom B3, a review of mating disruption options and incentives for California almond growers in Ballroom B4. In this room, India, exciting growth in our largest export market, and sweet results from a sugarless snack in room B10. They will all start at 10 a.m., so before that next session starts, feel free to grab a cup of coffee, sponsored by Sataki, in the pre-function of Ballroom B. Have a great day and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you for attending.